Hello! Just in case you don't know, I'm Sean Persinger, also known as Prester John. I'm the composer of that piece you just listened to and watched for the 8-string baritone. In this lesson, I'm going to talk a little bit about that etude, but mostly I'm going to talk about this Taylor 8-string baritone guitar. I don't know why it's taken me so long to make a video about this instrument. I've had it for 7 years now, almost exactly 7 years. I wrote that piece that you just watched and listened to on the day before Christmas 7 years ago. So that's why it's called The Day Before Christmas. And in this lesson, I'm going to talk about the difficulties of playing this, I've called it obstemperous instrument, meaning noisy and difficult. I wouldn't say it's noisy, but boy, this instrument can be a real challenge to play. So I wrote some etudes specifically for it. If you want even more information than what I'm talking about today, I would recommend checking out my book, Nobody Knows I'm Famous, A Year in the Life of an Unknown Musician. I go into a lot more detail in this book, but I'm going to give you a quick overview in this particular lesson. Tuning from low to high. The low string, which we have to call the 8th string, and by the way, in this video I'm probably going to sometimes call them 6 strings because it gets very complicated. This little low string here is a B, E. The next 2 strings are your A. Now there's your low note, and there's the octave. The next is your D. Again, octaves. F sharp. And finally another B. So when I strum an E chord, that's an E shape, but you're hearing a B. Same with a G chord. G major 7, I find myself playing lots of G major 7s on this guitar. You're actually hearing a D major 7. So that's the tuning. The strings are very heavy on this guitar. So that's the next thing to mention, is that I have actually changed the gauge of the strings that Taylor recommends and that Elixir made for this guitar. So I've lowered the gauge of my top 2 strings. The bottom 2 strings I've kept the same. And these octave strings in the middle, the lower string, I decreased the gauge on that, but I increased the gauge on the thinner string. I did that on both of these. So this string is lower than what Elixir recommends, and that string is higher. That, I found, made it easier to fret these strings and get both notes cleanly. Otherwise, I was having a lot of trouble. I think a lot of people have trouble with string gauge. They think heavier is better. It's not always better. So you might want to experiment with string gauge in general, but definitely on this guitar. Now that we've covered how this guitar is strung and the low tuning, let's talk about some of the difficulties involved in playing this instrument. So say, for instance, you're going to play a bluegrass song, something like Red-Haired Boy. You lose the consistency of that tone, right? You've got the octaves, and then suddenly, a single note. It just doesn't sound great. In fact, I've said this instrument seems like it's 3 2-stringed instruments shoved onto one fretboard. Or rather, we got the 2 strings, the 2 on the bottom, and these 4 in the middle. So it's a very odd instrument, and it's not necessarily easy or comfortable to play. If you're strumming chords, it's great, but playing the single note lines is very challenging, and fingerstyle guitar is also very challenging. That's why I wanted to write these etudes, to exploit the uniqueness of this instrument. I've also equated this to the idea of, for years, there was the harpsichord. And when the piano came along, composers realized, well, these instruments look the same, but they're not the same. So you write different music for the piano than you do for the harpsichord. That's what I found for this 8-string baritone. You have to write different music for it. And that's what I set out to do with my etudes. My etudes were very much inspired by the classic lineage of etudes, Bach, Sor, Caracassi on the guitar specifically, but most importantly, I was inspired by Leo Brouwer's simple etudes, which, by the way, are not simple. This is not a book of the transcription of the etudes. This is actually David Tannenbaum's notes on how to perform those etudes. These etudes are fantastic because they're extremely musical, they're very short, and they teach you specific techniques. So that's what I did with my etudes, and I've got several of them, and over the course of the next couple months I'll make a new video for each etude. or at least a few different of the Etudes. I've started with number 2 because it's close to Christmas, and I think it's probably the most musical of them. Number 1 is actually quite abstract. So let me explain a little bit what I'm doing in the Etude that you just listened to and watched. The first thing is that there's this great irony that I've got this 8-string baritone, but I'm actually attacking 6 of the strings. I never play the bottom 2 strings of this guitar in that Etude. So for instance, that opening chord, opening 2 chords, I'm only strumming from what here is the A string, right? On a regular 6-string guitar, I'd say I was strumming from the 4th string. So I'm not attacking the bottom 2 strings. But because this guitar resonates so much, these strings vibrate sympathetically, and you get the overtones of their open string ringing. So the bottom strings are ringing sympathetically. They're very ambient. You barely can hear them. But you have to believe me, those bottom 2 strings are ringing the whole time. So even though I never attack those 2 strings, they do ring in there a little bit on some of the different chords, and those overtones are one of the things that make this guitar so interesting and beautiful. This guitar resonates and sustains for days. That's another thing that I was really trying to exploit in this particular Etude. I'm only playing the top 6 strings, or 4 strings on a regular guitar. I'm letting notes ring for a very long time. I'm also trying to avoid string noise. That's why I move very slowly from chord to chord in this particular Etude. One last thing I want to show in that Etude, the last chord I end on is a very ambiguous chord. And then I reach up and I touch a harmonic at the 15th fret to get the high overtone of the G ringing. So that's one other thing to point out about the Etude. The one thing that's happening harmonically in this song is that there are a lot of major and minor seconds and major sevenths in this piece. So there's these diatonic dissonances, something I'm kind of obsessed with and have talked about a lot. And that gives this piece a particularly sad sound, this bittersweet melancholy. That's another thing about this instrument. I found that, for better or for worse, this guitar really likes to play sad music. I thought it would be something I'd play a lot of weird music on, and I've done that a little bit, but really what I've done is played a lot of sad music on this particular instrument. I have to suspect it has something to do with the low tones. Seem to be very somber, as opposed to something that's bright and fun. Maybe you could equate it to a ukulele, right? This bright, happy sound. And then here we have something that's sort of low and, as I said, somber, I think is the best word. I got to ask Bob Taylor at the NAMM show a few years ago, actually many years ago, right after I got this instrument, who he made this instrument for. And without missing a beat, Bob said, I made it for old guys who want to play Take It Easy using the original chord shapes, even though they can't hit the high notes anymore. So when you strum that G chord, you're actually hearing the D chord, so you can hit the note on top a little more comfortably. And that made total sense to me. And if you're looking for a rich, deep instrument just to strum on, this guitar is phenomenal. But if you're looking to do traditional fingerstyle or traditional pick style, I don't know that this is the best instrument for you. But if you're looking to create new music for a new instrument, this guitar holds a wealth of possibilities, some of which I've only just begun to mine, even though I've owned this guitar for 7 years. So I hope you liked this video. I hope some of you out there who own this baritone and maybe are struggling with it, you get some new insight into this particular instrument. Or if you're not struggling with it, send me some emails. I'd love to see some more music, love to see and hear more music written specifically for the 8-string baritone. Thank you so much for watching. Even those of you who perhaps don't have a baritone guitar, my guess is most of you don't. And at the very least, I hope you enjoyed the Etude at the beginning. And for those of you who do have a baritone, trust me, some more Etudes will be coming in the future. Thank you as always for watching. Please like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you next time. Bye-bye.